Hello, and welcome to America Unfiltered with me, your host, Ellie Cohanim in Washington, D.C., where we'll be discussing the stories shaping America and the world. From national debates to global affairs, we'll be covering the issues dominating the headlines in the U.S. and beyond. Let's get started. This week, my guest is Vice Chair of the America First Policy Institute's Center for American Security, Fred Fleitz, who's also a former CIA analyst and National Security Council Chief of Staff in the first Trump administration. Fred, thanks for joining me.
It's great to be here, and congratulations on the new show.
The United States seems closer than ever to brokering a final peace deal between Russia and Ukraine, with President Trump expressing his personal optimism that something good just may be happening, and reports that Ukraine has accepted a pared-down version of a Trump peace plan. Fred, what's your understanding of the current situation?
Well, there's been some progress in finding solutions to differences between the U.S. and Ukraine on this deal. It was originally a 28-point deal. It's now a 19-point deal. There still is not agreement on what territory, if any, that Ukraine will give to Russia. And right now, the renegotiated text is being discussed with the Russians. I frankly don't think we're very close to a deal. I don't think Putin is interested in negotiating. I do see several things that are promising. First of all, I think the U.S. has given the message to Zelenskyy that there will be a peace deal one day. It's going to be painful, and he has to decide how much pain he's going to take, because it's not going to be a perfect solution. And second, I'm very pleased that Secretary Rubio is more engaged in these talks. I think there's been a little bit of chaos with too many officials negotiating. I think Rubio understands the route ahead. It's going to be a long road, and I think it's going to be a while till we get Putin to negotiate in good faith. I think we had to put pressure, real economic pressure on Putin before he's going to deal.
Well, Fred, that's a lot to unpack. So if you don't mind, let's start with Putin. What do you think it's going to take on the U.S. part to get Putin to accept a peace agreement?
Trump has tried the easy way, diplomacy, offers of economic incentives, and Putin just spurned this, and I think he's disrespected Trump, and Trump doesn't like it. That's why Trump said he's going to give weapons to Ukraine through NATO, and he recently said he's going to implement very tough energy sanctions. I think those energy sanctions will eventually drive Putin to the negotiating table, especially if we can get the cooperation of India and China. And it's interesting that Chinese energy firms so far say they're going to cooperate with these sanctions. If that's true, it will put enormous pressure on Russia. But I'm afraid of Putin's fanaticism about Ukraine not being a nation, the Ukrainian people not being a separate people. He's not willing to drop those positions easily. I think we're going to have to put a lot of pressure on him before he will.
What safeguards would you propose to prevent Russia from exploiting a deal only to restart hostilities later?
There's a real concern, if we do get a peace agreement with Russia right now, that it will simply invade again in a few years. And that's why this new 28-point peace plan, I think it's 19 points now, has a provision for security assurances by the United States and Europe. They're going to have to be pretty tough. It's going to have to be clear that Russia will pay a high price if it was to invade. And obviously all the sanctions that will be lifted from Russia, they'll be reimposed. But it's a real concern. And one thing that I think has been addressed, there was talk of capping the Ukrainian military at 600,000 soldiers. That's been lifted to 800,000, which is about how many they have now. I'd like to see Ukraine armed to the teeth. If you ask me, that would be in the agreement. Maybe the Russians won't agree to that, but I think there has to be some a tangible military deterrent, both from Europe and the United States and from the Ukrainian army, to make it simply too expensive, too dangerous for Russia to invade again.
So a lot of pressure on the Russians. And now going back to Zelenskyy, it seems this agreement at some point also called for elections within 100 days. And Zelenskyy is in the midst of some sort of a scandal back home. Do you think it's going to require that this peace deal is going to require that Zelenskyy step down as president in Ukraine?
There has been concern in the US about corruption in Ukraine, the fact that there hasn't been an election. But my position is let's stop the war first, and we'll worry about that later. There's going to have to be investigations. We know a lot of corruption happens in wartime, and I hope Zelensky's not corrupt. There's people who think he is. I just don't want to deal with this right now. I just want to stop the killing. I think that's where President Trump is too.
How would you judge Zelensky's leadership and diplomatic skills, Fred? Do you think Zelensky can manage getting his country through the end of this war?
I think Zelensky is a hero in getting the country through this war so far. I think he's made some missteps in his dealings with Trump, but I think he's corrected them. And right now, he's trying to find a way to get out of this war in an honorable way. And obviously, it's very painful for the Ukrainian people to contemplate any concessions to Russia or to agree to a peace deal while Russia still holds Ukrainian territory. And he's going to have to find a way to get the Ukrainian people to realize that they're going to have to make these painful concessions. I think he can do that because, look, realistically, Ukraine will lose this war. They will run out of troops. They're not going to be able to hold out indefinitely. I don't think we're near that point, but Zelensky needs to think about that and to convince the Ukrainian people we have to make the best deal we can.
With the U.S. already funding Ukraine in the trillions of dollars and without having endless financial and economic capabilities, what do you think is in the American interest in terms of the timeline of trying to bring this war to an end?
Well, President Trump doesn't think we should have unending military and economic support for this conflict, which is why he wants to stop it. I think that the amount of money we're spending is really not the issue. I think the issue is that we want to stop this conflict because it's a threat to global security. It's a threat to American interest. And one thing that's very clear is that we want to limit American involvement. This is a European war. Europe should take primary responsibility for it. That's also Trump's position. But I believe that Trump sees that there is an interest in stopping this war with the U.S. assisting Ukraine. And that's why he's said he's going to actually increase weapons to Ukraine, but they're going to be provided to Ukraine and purchased by NATO.
Fred, thanks for bringing up the European question because they have been some of the strongest critics of the Trump plan right now. What do you think the European role can be and should be?
Well, Europe has been consistently unhelpful here. They didn't like Trump's approach. Let's get a ceasefire and resolve the other issues later. They wanted everything resolved up front, and that wasn't possible. Trump changed their position on that. Now they're talking about an idea they had before of sending in European peacekeepers on the ground. It's a great idea. Putin will not agree to that. And as long as the Europeans push that, they're making a solution harder. Europe has one thing it should be doing. It should be pressuring Putin. It should stop buying energy from Putin, and their diplomats should be trying to meet with Putin, put pressure on Putin to deal. And they're not doing that. All they do is criticize Trump. It's very unhelpful.
Yeah, it is a little surprising to see the European reaction. And Fred, I have a final question for you on this topic. And you brought up China just a moment ago. You and I have had previous conversations about the China, Russia, Iran axis. I'm curious what you think. The end of this war, where does it leave this axis?
I don't think that Chinese President Xi is thrilled about this war. It hurts Chinese interests worldwide. China doesn't like being linked to a conflict that the vast majority of nations would like to see end. They don't like the fact that Russia invaded. On the other hand, Xi does not want to see Russia lose. So I think he's trying to find a way to support Putin so Russia doesn't lose. But we've seen signals, I think, over the last few months that Xi again may be looking for ways to end this conflict. And I'm glad that when President Trump recently spoke to Xi, he raised Ukraine with him. And I'm hoping that that's going to be a way out of this. Look, if this war could end, it could have significant implications for global security. It could break this North Korea, Iran, Russia, China axis. It might break the growing relationship between Iran and Russia and the relationship between North Korea and Russia. and it could have real significant implications and make the world safer. Trump just has to find a way to get a ceasefire, and it has been quite elusive.
I want to take us to a whole other side of the globe, which is some perhaps startling developments. We're seeing the United States move a lot of assets into the Western Hemisphere. At the same time, we saw the Trump administration designate a group that is linked to Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro as a foreign terrorist organization, which gives President Trump and his administration the ability to carry out actions without U.S. congressional approvals. Fred, as you look at the Western Hemisphere, what's your prediction? Could we be seeing kinetic activity or even the ouster of Maduro in the next few weeks?
I think the purpose of this effort is to stop the flow of illegal drugs, especially cocaine, from Venezuela, as well as a flood of criminal gang members who have made it into the United States and are committing all kinds of crimes and rapes and murders. That's something Trump wants to stop. And he believes that these are a threat to U.S. national security. That's why the military force is down there. In terms of regime change, I don't think that's something that is a priority for Trump, because Trump came into office saying he wasn't going to do that. But I also believe that this large military force in the region is intended to reassert American influence and control in the Western Hemisphere, in Central America, Central and South America, that really had been reduced due to the incompetence of the Biden administration. So I think he's sending a message. He doesn't want Maduro's influence to spread. He wants America to have a strong presence in the region. And we'll see what's going to happen. I hear Trump may soon talk to Maduro, but this is a narco state. The military, the government is involved in the production and distribution of illegal narcotics. This isn't just drug gangs. It's the government itself, and it's something Trump isn't going to tolerate.
We've also been hearing, Fred, that there's the Cuba influence, that every country from Russia to China to Iran has perhaps boots on the ground in Venezuela. Do you think that this is purely about the narco terrorism, or do you think that there's more that's going on, between the lines there?
No, Venezuela has been a member of a group of rogue states. We know the Iranians have been very close to the Venezuelan government. There are Cuban intelligence officers and doctors all over Venezuela. Cuba makes money by putting their doctors in countries like that, because Venezuela doesn't have their own. The Chinese and Russians have invested a huge amount of money in Venezuela. I think Venezuela has taken money from China, Maduro and his predecessor, to win elections, and they sold away rights to their oil for years to come to the Chinese. The Chinese bought this influence. So basically, China and Russia, they don't want Maduro to go, but they don't seem to have an answer to this U.S. military presence. I know there's been reports of a couple large military transport planes flying to Venezuela from Russia. I don't know what it is that they flew in, but I haven't seen much by Russia and China being done to come to the aid of Maduro.
Okay, so you don't expect that we're going to see any kind of major power intervention in Venezuela. At the same time, this military buildup is an interesting development, and it's something new, perhaps a more aggressive posture for the Trump administration. Do you think that that the administration is trying to signal also something bigger about this hemisphere being America's hemisphere?
I think that's right. It is America's hemisphere. American leadership has really waned in this hemisphere, and certainly under the Biden administration. And it is a priority of this administration. There's many things President Trump wants to do in his second term, but one of them is to reassert American leadership in the Western Hemisphere.
Fred, if I can take us now to the Middle East. The Trump administration just accomplished a major diplomatic coup with getting the United Nations to essentially turn the Trump peace plan for Gaza into international law by supporting a recent U.S. resolution there. At the same time, we're seeing what perhaps is the greatest challenge to the implementation of the Trump plan is the disarming of Hamas. Do you think we're going to see moderate Muslim countries like perhaps Azerbaijan playing a role, or do you think it has to be the IDF that eventually disarms Hamas?
Well, if you listen to CNN or read the New York Times, which I encourage you not to do, because they're fake news, liberal media, you'll see them saying that the Trump peace plan for Gaza has failed. And it hasn't failed. Its main objective was to get the living hostages out of Gaza and to implement a ceasefire. It achieved those two objectives, which everyone thought just a few months ago would never happen. Now, the road to the other steps of the plan are going to be difficult to implement. Hamas does not want to disarm, but it is very encouraging that not only was this plan endorsed by every Arab state and the Palestinian Authority, it was just endorsed by the Security Council. China and Russia didn't veto it. China and Russia veto everything anymore in the Security Council that the U.S. wants to pass. They didn't veto this because the Palestinian Authority supported it. And the reason for that is that the plan contains difficult compromises for both sides. One of them, it provides a role for the Palestinian Authority in governing Gaza after the Palestinians reform, and it provides a pathway for a Palestinian state after the Palestinians reform. Now, that may take a while, but those were very difficult conditions for Israel to accept. But by including that, it got the support of Saudi Arabia and Qatar and Egypt and the Palestinian Authority. It's why we were able to get these incredible achievements, releasing the hostages and the ceasefire at the beginning of the agreement. That Hamas did not hold back hostages as bargaining chips. The problem is Hamas does not want to disarm. It wants to play a role in post-war Gaza. And we're having problems now because there's supposed to be an international security force deployed to Gaza to disarm Hamas and to prepare the strip for rebuilding and humanitarian efforts. And there's an obstacle there. It could be that those efforts will take place in areas that have been demilitarized and Gaza has been, Hamas has been pushed out of. But there's real issues here because there aren't many nations that will agree to go into Gaza if they think they're going to war with they will be going to war with Hamas. They want Hamas to say up front it will cooperate with this force. There also are some nations like Turkey that the Israelis are very wary about allowing to serve there because Turkey has been too close to Hamas through history. Maybe Azerbaijan could provide troops. I heard Pakistan, Indonesia are possibilities. I'm not sure who will be in this force, but first, I think there's going to be a determined effort by our allies in the Arabian Gulf region to work with Hamas to get it to live up to its commitments under the peace plan, to disarm, to become part of peaceful society, or to leave the area in peace, which also is provided in the plan.
Fred, what's your assessment on how defeated Hamas is today?
Well, I mean, it's been devastated, but there still are a significant number of Hamas fighters left in Gaza. There are some still living in tunnels. I know not long ago there were a bunch of Hamas fighters in southern Gaza who they didn't know what to do with because they wouldn't come out unless they disarmed. And when they did come out, they wanted to leave the country, but no nation would take them. What nation wants to admit terrorists from a group that has a history of starting terrorist acts and coups in other countries? Egypt and Jordan know very well from history they don't want these people in their country because they're so destabilizing. Saudi Arabia doesn't want them. Ellie, I'll tell you where I want to send them. I want to send them to Iran. Iran's responsible for the October 7th attack by financing Hamas, giving them the weapons that they needed to attack. It would be, I mean, I hate to add terrorists to a terrorist state, but if I can think of a solution to this impossible situation, I would send these Hamas fighters to Iran.
The Iranian regime has played a big role. Like you said, they've been the masterminds and the funders of the October 7th war and everything that we've seen unfold in the last 2 years. Fred, what that brings me to is your thoughts on how much of this plan do you think can be achieved within the next few years within the Trump presidency?
I think quite a bit of it will achieve. If it's determined that Hamas is not going to cooperate, sectors of Gaza that Hamas has been cleaned out of will be redeveloped. The housing will be built. There will be an effort to find a way for these people to live in peace. I think they will deploy an international stability force in the regions that Hamas has been swept out of. It's an imperfect solution, but there's not going to be another peace plan. That was made clear to Hamas. This is it. It was really a brilliant solution by Trump to get everyone on board and to say, this is the last plan, and there's a contingency. If Hamas doesn't cooperate, the world will move on without it.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I think it's the same approach the Trump administration took in the first term with the Abraham Accords, which is really kind of taking the veto power away from the Palestinian Authority or Palestinian leadership in some way. But I wanted to ask you, Fred, regarding President Trump himself, he's the chairman of this peace board. How hands-on do you expect him to be?
I think he'll be very hands-on, and I think the Saudi Crown Prince may be on the peace board also, and a former British Prime Minister. I don't think the president will be running the day-to-day activities of this board. He'll probably designate a senior official in his administration, but he wants to be known as a peacemaker president, and it's not just in Ukraine. It's also in the Middle East, in Gaza. And he's made significant progress towards ending this conflict. It hasn't been ended yet, but he's gotten a lot further than anyone had predicted.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think it's going to require President Trump to be heavily involved in order to get the different parties to move the plan forward?
I think what's required right now is intensive negotiations by Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Egypt, U.S. special envoys, including Jared Kushner, who's been brilliant in working on this, Steve Witkoff. These parties will be working together to pressure Hamas and Israel to finish the deal. We have to have Israel to fully cooperate. There's aspects of this deal it doesn't like, but this deal is in Israel's interest, and Hamas has to disarm and cooperate with this agreement. Hamas has no future, but the fighters in Hamas can be saved. They don't have to die underground in tunnels or be blown up by the Israeli army. There's a future for them. And I think we have to find a place for them to go. If they do not want to live in peace in Gaza, I hope some kind of refuge can be found for them, that some nation will allow them to go to their country and live in exile.
Fred, you just mentioned the Saudi Crown Prince MBS, who was just in the United States and finished a rather successful visit from both the American readout and the Saudi readout. What's your take on the visit?
Well, the rapport between these two powerful leaders was just incredible to watch. I think they like each other. They got along well. They struck important economic deals, defense deals. The U.S. agreed to sell stealth fighters to Saudi Arabia. And the prince said that he actually is interested in joining the Abraham Accords. He simply wants to have a pathway to a Palestinian state. And I like that answer because he didn't ask for a guarantee. He didn't ask for more than can be provided. I think what the Crown Prince asked for is eminently doable under the current peace plan. I think that we have to work out some more details, but it suggested to me that given the way things are going in Trump's leadership, the Crown Prince is very eager to make this agreement. And I was so happy to see President Trump repair the U.S.-Saudi relationship after the extreme damage done by the Biden administration, which I don't want to talk about. But also we know that the Saudi Arabians are smart and savvy. And if they feel they're being disrespected and treated badly by the United States, they will go elsewhere. And I was very concerned during the Biden administration. The frequent trips by Chinese diplomats to the region, new trade deals and oil deals China was striking with Saudi Arabia and with the Arabian Gulf states, and the presence of the Russians in the region. So if America walks away, if we create a power vacuum, Russia and China will rush in. That's not in the interest of the region. It's not in our interests. So I'm glad that Trump really pushed that back and has reestablished a strong strategic relationship and friendship between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, that's a very important point. And I don't know if a lot of observers noticed, but we did see announcement from U.S. Energy Secretary Chris Wright about even U.S. And Saudi nuclear cooperation, which is something that I believe the Chinese were doing under the Biden administration. Could you tell us a little bit more about that and the significance of that?
The Saudis want nuclear power, and if the U.S. does not sell them nuclear reactors, China will. Now, there's no provision for Saudi Arabia enriching uranium, which of course the Iranians are, and maybe someday the Saudis will want to do that. But the Crown Prince wants to prepare his country for now and the distant future. He wants to make it into an AI superpower. He wants to have sources of energy other than hydrocarbons, which means he wants to develop nuclear energy. I'm very glad he's not going the way of the liberals in the West with windmills and solar panels. That will not be enough to meet Saudi Arabia's energy needs. He realizes that nuclear power is the future, and I believe some important deals were signed during this agreement to get Saudi Arabia there.
And what do you think of the $1 trillion pledge towards the U.S. economy? Will this bring the two economies together? Will it tie the two countries into the future?
I think so. It shows the generosity of Saudi Arabia and the interest in investing. This is not a grant, this is an investment that both countries will benefit from.
And Fred, last question on this. The U.S. has agreed to sell the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia the F-35 fighter jets that they had been requesting. What change do you think this means for the geopolitics of the Middle East?
Well, part of the America First approach to U.S. national security is supporting our allies and alliances, but asking members of our alliances to carry their own weight. And giving F-35s to Saudi Arabia is going to significantly increase the capabilities and power of their military to help defend the region. They simply won't be dependent on the United States. It makes Saudi Arabia a much stronger deterrent to the threat from Iran. It's going to make Iran think twice if it ever thinks of attacking Saudi Arabia. It's a good move for global security. It's a good move for the United States.
Absolutely. Well, Fred, you took us around the world today. We're so grateful to you, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Good to be here.
You've been watching America Unfiltered with Ellie Cohanim from Washington, D.C. Until next time, goodbye.